Have you ever walked down the aisle in your wedding dress and realized the three people you wanted there the most had left their seats completely empty? Before I begin, let me know where you're watching from, and if you've ever felt abandoned by your own family, hit that like button. You're on Revenge with John, and I'm Emily Carter. This is the story of how my family chose power over me even on my wedding day. I'm 27 years old. On the day I married Ryan Bennett, the hall was filled with music, flowers, and applause. My friends stood clapping, cheering, phones raised. His family wiped away happy tears. But when I looked toward the front row, the bride's side, my chest turned to stone. 3 chairs. 3 name cards. All untouched. Mr. Graham Carter. Mrs. Isabel Carter. Cole Carter. My father. My mother. My brother. They didn't come. And worse, they didn't even send a single message. No excuse. No delay. Nothing. At first glance you might think, maybe there was a car accident, a medical emergency, or some unavoidable disaster. But that's not what happened. The truth is far darker. My family's absence wasn't an accident, it was a strategy. Growing up I was a Carter. That name meant something in my city. My father is Graham Carter, a man who collects board memberships like trophies. My mother, Isabel, is the perfect society wife. Always in photographs, never in scandals. My brother, Cole, was raised to inherit my father's empire. Me. I was supposed to be the daughter who married correctly. See, in the Carter family, marriage isn't about love. It's about alliances. Who you marry determines your family's power, wealth, and image. And when I chose Ryan, a journalist, a man who believes in truth instead of money, they decided my wedding wasn't worth attending. But what I didn't know that morning as I put on my dress was this. My father had done far more than just refuse to show up. He had made calls. He had made arrangements. He had even warned certain relatives and business partners, if you attend Emily's wedding, don't expect to do business with me again. That's why my side of the aisle wasn't just empty of family, it was empty of everyone with our last name. It wasn't just absence. It was sabotage. So there I was, veil pinned, bouquet trembling in my hand, walking down the aisle with his father instead of mine. My smile looked perfect for the cameras, but inside I was breaking. Because as much as I wanted to believe my parents still loved me, a part of me already knew. They had chosen reputation over their daughter. And the most painful part? This wasn't just about disapproval. My father had a very specific reason. A plan I would only discover after the wedding. A plan that explained why he worked so hard to keep every Carter away from me. But I'll get to that. For now, picture this. My vows trembling in my hands, Ryan's eyes steady on mine, and behind us, 3 empty chairs. The space where my family should have been. The space my father had cleared deliberately. And while I stood there promising forever to the man I love, I had no idea that somewhere across town, in a private dining room filled with crystal glasses and power suits, my father was making a toast to the future son-in-law he had chosen for me. When the last note of the quartet faded and the applause thundered for my vows, I told myself my family's absence was just stubborn pride. A punishment for not obeying their wishes. But that night when I learned what they were really doing during my wedding, my blood ran cold. While I walked down the aisle, bouquet shaking in my hand, my father was sitting at the head of a long mahogany table in a private club downtown. No roses, no violin music. Just dark suits, polished silverware, and men who built empires with signatures. The people at that table weren't strangers. They were my father's closest allies. Old money families, partners from Carter and Rhodes, and most chilling of all, the Whitmores. If you remember, that's the family whose son, Evan Whitmore, my father had been grooming me to marry since I was 19. I thought those conversations had ended years ago. I was wrong. Instead of walking me down the aisle, my father raised a glass and toasted Evan. To the union our families have long discussed, he said, voice steady, commanding. May it bring strength, continuity, and legacy to both our names. They clinked glasses. They smiled. They celebrated an engagement that never existed. When I heard about that toast hours later, my legs nearly gave out. Because while I was saying "I do" to Ryan in a hall filled with orchids and fairy lights, my parents were pretending I didn't exist. Pretending my vows were meaningless. Pretending I wasn't Emily Carter anymore. They had already erased me from the family ledger. The truth came to me in pieces. First, from a cousin who had secretly slipped away from the business dinner, and sent me a photo of the Whitmores at my father's table. Then from a distant aunt who whispered, "Your father didn't want us to attend. He made it clear. If we went to your wedding we'd lose our place in the family trust." So that was it. My wedding day wasn't just ignored, it was boycotted under threat. Every Carter absent wasn't simply choosing not to come. They were forced into silence by my father's power. I should have been angry and I was. But under the rage was something sharper, something heavier. Clarity. My father didn't just disapprove of my marriage. He wanted to rewrite my life. He wanted to trade me like stock as if love were a commodity and daughters were contracts. And when I refused, he erased me. At least that was his plan. But plans have cracks. And the cracks were starting to show. Because Evan Whitmore, the man at the center of my father's toast, was hiding a secret of his own. One that would shatter everything my father thought he had secured, and turn his absence at my wedding into the biggest mistake of his life. Do you know what's worse than being abandoned? It's realizing the people who left you behind weren't simply punishing you, they were plotting something else, something darker while you stood there waiting for their love. The morning after my wedding, Ryan and I woke up in the hotel suite the Bennetts had surprised us with. White sheets tangled around us, sunlight flooding in, and the faint taste of champagne still on my lips. It should have been bliss. Instead, my mind was still circling those 3 empty chairs. I had expected silence from my family, but I hadn't expected whispers to follow. And those whispers carried me straight into a truth more twisted than I could have imagined. It began with a message. Around 9 a.m., while Ryan ordered us breakfast in bed, I opened my phone to find a notification from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. Attached was a blurry photo taken the night before. A long dining table, men in black suits, women in diamonds. And at the head of it, my father raising a glass. The caption read, "You should know what you were up against last night." "I'm sorry." I zoomed in. Beside my father sat Evan Whitmore, smiling that cold, practiced smile I remembered from childhood gatherings. He was the boy our families had once joked I'd end up with. The joke had never felt funny. Now it made me sick. My cousin's second message came quickly. "Your father toasted Evan. Called him the future of the family. It was like you didn't exist." I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Ryan placed the tray of croissants and coffee on the table and sat beside me. "What is it?" I handed him the phone. He read, jaw tightening the way it always does when he's furious but refuses to explode. So that's where they were. They staged their own celebration. I nodded, throat tight. It wasn't just absence, Ryan. It was replacement. But the real blow came hours later. We met with my Aunt Clara in a quiet cafe, one of the few relatives who still dared to speak to me. She leaned across the table, her pearls trembling against her neck. "Emily, your father made it very clear. If anyone attended your wedding, they'd lose their place in the family trust. That's why everyone stayed away." I clenched my cup so tightly the ceramic burned. So it wasn't choice. It was fear. Clara's lips pressed thin. "Fear and ambition. Graham told us you weren't serious. He said the real future was with Evan Whitmore." At that name, bow rose in my throat. Evan. The boy groomed to be my groom. But then Clara lowered her voice. "There's something you don't know. Something none of us were supposed to know." "What is it?" I whispered. She hesitated, glancing around the cafe. Then she leaned closer. "Evan isn't who your father thinks he is." The days that followed felt like a thriller unraveling in real time. Through whispered phone calls and scraps of information, a picture emerged. Evan Whitmore, the polished golden boy of his family, had been living a double life. There was another woman. That didn't surprise me. Men like Evan collect women like they collect cufflinks. But this wasn't just an affair. This woman was married to a man whose company held a crucial contract with Carter and Rhodes. And Evan had been careless. Too many texts, too many secret trips, too much arrogance. The husband had discovered everything. And he had proof. Proof that could not only ruin Evan, but drag down anyone tied to him, including my father's empire. One night, Ryan found me at my desk, files and screenshots spread out like puzzle pieces. He placed his hands on my shoulders. "Emily, are you saying your father tried to trade you into a marriage that would have destroyed you both?" I nodded, my throat raw. He wanted power so badly he didn't even see the cracks. If I had obeyed him, if I had married Evan like he planned, I'd be standing in the center of a scandal big enough to crush me. Ryan squeezed my shoulders, steady as always. Instead you married me. I laughed softly, bitterly. And because of that they left me alone at the altar. No, Ryan said firmly. Because of that you dodged a bullet your father put in your hands and told you to fire. It's strange how betrayal can turn into clarity. For years, I believed I was unworthy in my father's eyes because I hadn't lived up to his standards. Now I understood, it was never about worth. It was about control. He wanted a pawn, not a daughter. And when I refused to move where he pointed, he wiped me off the board. But what he didn't realize was that the pawn he dismissed had turned into a queen, capable of moving in ways he never anticipated. By the end of that week I held documents, messages and photos that could ruin not just Evan, but the deal my father had been chasing for years. Proof that the man he toasted on my wedding night was a liability. I remember staring at those files, my heart pounding. For once, I wasn't the neglected daughter begging to be seen. I was holding the weapon my father had handed me without even knowing it. I whispered to myself, they tried to erase me. But this is how I'll write myself back in. As I closed the folder, I realized something chilling. My father's betrayal had handed me the perfect chance for revenge. But the question was, how far was I willing to go? Do you know the exact moment when you stop being the child begging for love and start becoming the adult holding the power? For me, it was the night I slid a thick black folder across a polished mahogany desk and watched my father's face drain of color. The days after my wedding were a blur. Ryan and I postponed our honeymoon. It didn't feel right to escape to beaches and sunsets while the ghost of my family's betrayal still rattled around inside me. Instead, I threw myself into research, connecting every dot, every whisper, every rumor about Evan Whitmore. What I discovered was worse than I'd imagined. Evan's double life wasn't just a fling with a married woman. He had been funneling money, gifts, even business favors into keeping that affair quiet. And the husband he betrayed? He wasn't just anyone. He was the COO of a company with a contract worth millions to Carter and Rhodes. If those photos, those receipts, those text messages ever saw daylight, it wouldn't just ruin Evan's shiny image. It would set off a domino collapse straight into my father's empire. The man my father toasted as the future of our family was a grenade with the pin already pulled. And I was holding the pin. Ryan found me one evening at our kitchen table, papers spread out in organized stacks, sticky notes marking timelines and connections. He leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, watching me like someone afraid to disturb a tiger pacing in a cage. You've been at this for hours, he said softly. I can't stop, I murmured, eyes fixed on the evidence. Do you realize what this means, Ryan? They erased me from my own wedding because my father wanted me married to Evan. If I'd obeyed him, I'd be tied to this disaster. I'd be standing right in the blast zone. Ryan walked over, placed his hands on my shoulders. His touch grounded me like it always did. So what are you going to do with it? I looked up at him, meeting his steady brown eyes. What do you think I should do? He didn't answer right away. He never did when it mattered. Finally he said, if you go public with this, you won't just ruin Evan. You'll humiliate your father. You'll burn every bridge left between you and your family. Are you ready for that? My throat tightened. For a moment the little girl inside me, the one who used to sit with math trophies waiting for her parents to notice, hesitated. Did I still want their approval? Did I still want the possibility of reconciliation? Then I remembered my wedding day. The empty chairs. My father's toast to another man. My mother's silence. Yes, I whispered. I'm ready. The next morning I called in favors. A lawyer I'd met during a clinic internship. A journalist Ryan trusted. I made copies of everything, digital and physical. Because if I was going to confront my father, I needed to know he couldn't bury this with a phone call or a payoff. That evening I dressed not like a daughter but like an opponent. Black blazer. Crisp white shirt. Hair pulled back sharp enough to cut. Ryan offered to come with me but I shook my head. This is mine, I told him. I need to do this alone. When I entered my father's study, the scent of cigars and leather hit me like a memory I wanted to spit out. He was at his desk, glasses perched low, reviewing documents like the world was still firmly under his control. Emily, he said, not looking up. This is unexpected. It shouldn't be, I replied. I placed the folder on the desk between us. But then again, neither was your absence at my wedding. That made him pause. He removed his glasses, set them down with deliberate calm. We discussed this. Your choices made our presence impossible. No, I said, voice sharp. You made it impossible. You threatened our family to keep them away. You toasted Evan as if I were dead. His jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it. I opened the folder. Photos spilled out. Evan with the woman in hotel lobbies, texts printed in black and white, receipts that spelled bribery more clearly than ink ever could. My father's hand froze above the papers. His eyes scanned one photo, then another. His composure cracked just barely, but I saw it. The flicker of panic. What is this? He demanded. This, I said, leaning forward, is the man you tried to trade me to. The man you held above my husband. The man you thought would secure your legacy. Instead, he's about to sink it. And now I get to decide whether to light the fuse. Silence fell, thick and suffocating. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. For the first time in my life, my father didn't look like a giant. He looked small. You don't understand, he finally said. These things can be managed. No, I cut him off. That's where you're wrong. They can't be managed. Not anymore. I have every copy, every proof. And if you ever try to erase me again, if you ever dare to treat me like I don't matter, this goes public. Carter and Rhodes falls with him. His nostrils flared, a storm behind his eyes. You'd destroy your own family's name? I felt something inside me harden, something that had been waiting years for this moment. You destroyed it the day you left me standing alone at my wedding. This isn't me tearing it down. This is me protecting myself from you. For the first time, he had no comeback. He looked at me and I saw a war waging behind his eyes. The instinct to intimidate, the urge to dismiss me, and the dawning realization that he couldn't. Not anymore. Finally, he leaned back in his chair, defeated. What do you want, Emily? I stood tall, gathering the folder back into my hands. I want you to remember something you taught me without meaning to. Leverage isn't about who has the power on paper. It's about who's willing to use it. And now that's me. I turned toward the door. His voice followed, low, shaken. If you do this, there's no going back. I looked over my shoulder. There already isn't. And then I left. That night, as I sat with Ryan, the folder on our table between us, I realized I had crossed a line I could never uncross. I wasn't the neglected daughter anymore. I wasn't the forgotten bride. I was the woman holding the match, and the empire my father had built was soaked in gasoline. Have you ever held someone's future in your hands and wondered, should I burn it to ash or bend it until it serves me? That was the question staring back at me in the glow of my desk lamp. The folder of Evan's secrets open like a weapon across the table. For nights after confronting my father, sleep barely touched me. I'd lie awake next to Ryan, his steady breathing grounding me, and stare at the ceiling while my mind chased two futures. One where I destroyed my father's empire, and one where I controlled it without ever setting foot inside. The folder sat on my desk like an invitation. Every page was leverage. Texts, receipts, photographs that could break the Whitmores and, through them, Carter and Rhodes. With one email to the right journalist, one drop to the right blog, the scandal would explode like fireworks across the financial world. My father's name, his precious brand, would burn. And God, how I wanted to. I wanted him to feel what I had felt at my wedding, staring at empty chairs. To taste humiliation in the back of his throat. To know what it was like to be erased. But then Ryan's voice would echo in my head. Intimacy or destruction, that's your choice. But remember, fire doesn't ask what it devours. One night, unable to bear the weight alone, I spoke it aloud. What if I leak it all? I whispered into the dark. Ryan stirred, turned toward me, his hand finding mine beneath the blanket. Then you burn the bridge forever. Not just with your father, but with anyone who still stands beside him. You'll scorch the whole field, Emily. Maybe that's what it takes, I muttered. Or, he said gently, maybe what it takes is showing him you don't need to burn his empire. You already own it because you can end it whenever you choose. That's power. His words hung in the dark like a compass pointing somewhere I hadn't looked. The next day I stood in front of the mirror in our small apartment, folder clutched tight. My reflection looked nothing like the daughter who once begged for a smile at dinner tables. My shoulders were square, my jaw set. I realized then, it wasn't about revenge for revenge's sake. It was about rewriting the rules. If I destroyed my father, I'd always be the girl defined by the ashes of his empire. If I bargained, if I bent him to my conditions, I'd step out from under his shadow with proof of my own strength. I chose the bargain. When I walked into my father's office again, he didn't greet me. He sat at his desk, posture stiff, hands folded as if bracing for impact. "Emily," he said flat. "Back so soon?" I set the folder on his desk, not opening it this time. "You know what's in there? You know what I could do?" His jaw tightened. "Yes. I came here to make sure you also know this. I don't want your company. I don't want your money. I don't want your legacy." His eyes flickered with confusion. "Then what do you want?" I leaned forward, every word sharp and deliberate. "I want you to stay out of my life. You will never again use me as a bargaining chip. You will never again try to sabotage me or Ryan. You will recognize my marriage. You will acknowledge me when people speak of this family. And you will do it because if you don't, this folder goes public. And your empire collapses with it." For a moment, silence filled the room like smoke. My father's face reddened. "You're blackmailing your own blood." "No," I said calmly. "I'm protecting myself from my own blood." He stood suddenly, palms slamming on the desk. "Do you realize what you're doing? If this leaks, it's not just me. Hundreds of employees, families." "Stop," I cut him off. "Don't you dare guilt me with the consequences of your greed. You made this bed. Evan made his. I'm just the one holding the truth." His mouth opened, then shut. For once in my life he had no argument. Finally he sat back down heavily. "And if I agree, if I concede, then you get to keep your empire. Your reputation stays intact. And I get my freedom. Those are my terms." His gaze dropped to the folder, then back to me. There was defeat in his eyes, but also something else. Respect, maybe, or the faint recognition that I was no longer his pawn. "You've changed," he muttered. "No," I replied. "I've just stopped playing by your rules." When I left his office, the air outside felt sharper, cleaner. I clutched the folder to my chest, not as a weapon but as a shield. My father might still hold his empire, but he no longer held me. That night, sitting on our couch with Ryan, I finally let myself exhale. "It's done," I told him. "And how do you feel?" he asked. I thought about it. Not triumphant. Not exactly. But steady. Strong. "Like I've reclaimed something they tried to take," I said. "My own worth." Ryan smiled softly. "That's better than revenge." "Maybe," I admitted. "But make no mistake, if they ever try to erase me again, I'll burn it all without looking back. Because here's the truth. My wedding day taught me the pain of absence. But standing in that office with leverage in my hands taught me something even greater. The most dangerous person is not the one who wants to destroy you. It's the one who learns they can destroy you, and chooses not to. Do you know what it feels like to finally walk out of a war, not because you surrendered, but because you won on your own terms? That's how it felt, stepping out of my father's office with the folder clutched under my arm, the weight of generations of Carter expectations sliding off my shoulders like chains finally broken. For weeks afterward, the silence from my father was deafening. No angry calls. No veiled threats. Just quiet. For a man like Graham Carter, silence wasn't weakness. It was acknowledgement. He knew the balance of power had shifted. He had been forced to bend and he hated it. But he also respected it in the only way men like him know how, by no longer underestimating me. The first time he called me after our bargain, his voice was steady, polite, almost rehearsed. "Emily, how are you? Not what are you doing with my name, not your marriage is a mistake. Just a plain question, stripped of agenda." I almost didn't recognize it. "I'm good," I answered carefully. "Ryan and I are happy." Pause. "Then, that's good. That's what matters." It wasn't love. It wasn't apology. But it was the closest thing to acceptance I'd ever heard from him. My mother was different. She showed up at our apartment one Saturday morning with a basket of muffins she had probably bought from the most expensive bakery in town, pretending she had baked them herself. 4 years she had been the silent witness to my father's power plays, the elegant mask that kept the Carter family picture perfect. But now she sat on my couch, smoothing her skirt nervously. "I'm sorry," she said suddenly. "For all of it. For letting it go on so long. For not protecting you." The words landed heavy. Too heavy to forgive in one breath. I stirred my coffee. "You watched him erase me for years. You stood by while he made me feel invisible. Why now?" Her eyes filled with tears. Because when you stood up to him, I realized. I should have done that a long time ago. For a moment I wanted to believe her. And maybe part of me did. But the little girl in me no longer needed her mother's validation. I wasn't starved for scraps of affection anymore. I don't need muffins, Mom, I said softly. I need consistency. If you want to be in my life, prove it. Over time. With actions. She nodded quickly like a student taking instructions. I will. I promise. And for the first time in years I felt like the one in control of that relationship too. As for Evan Whitmore, his scandal never broke into headlines, not because I spared him, but because I didn't need to waste my energy on him. The folder stayed locked in a safe deposit box, copies stored with my lawyer. It was enough for my father to know I had it. Every time his empire held a gala or announced a new deal, he knew that a single word from me could bring it all crashing down. That knowledge was leverage more powerful than destruction. It was a leash he couldn't cut. Life with Ryan became something steady, something real. No staged toasts. No empty chairs. Just laughter in our little kitchen, late-night debates about books and movies, mornings where he kissed my forehead before heading out with ink still smudged on his fingers. One evening, months after the storm had settled, I sat at the table with Ryan, a small white stick in my hand. 2 pink lines stared back at me. I couldn't breathe at first. Then I laughed. Then I cried. Ryan dropped to his knees, his hands shaking as he touched my belly. "We're going to be parents," he whispered. His voice cracked, and for once the man who never blinked when the world tried to scare him let his tears fall freely. That night, lying awake, I thought about what kind of mother I would be. I thought about the empty chairs at my wedding, the cold lessons of my childhood, the bruises no one ever saw. And I made a vow, not to my father, not to my mother, not even to Ryan, but to the life growing inside me. I will never let you wonder if you are enough. I will never make you fight for scraps of love. You will never be a pawn in someone else's game. Your legacy will not be power or money, it will be love. Months later, when we gathered our friends and Ryan's family for a small dinner to share the news, I looked around the table. Every seat was full. Every face was warm. My parents were there too, tentative, careful, quieter than I'd ever known them. They were trying, awkwardly, imperfectly, but for once genuinely. When the toast came, it wasn't my father standing at the head of the table. It was me. I raised my glass, my voice steady. "To family," I said. "Not the one you're born into. The one you built. The one that shows up." Everyone clinked their glasses. Ryan's hand found mine under the table. My mother's eyes shimmered. Even my father nodded just once as if conceding the point. And I knew in that moment, the Carter's legacy of silence and control had ended with me. Because here's the truth I learned through betrayal and pain. Legacy isn't what you inherit. Legacy is what you choose to pass on. My parents left me empty chairs. But I will leave my child full tables, open arms, and a name that means love instead of leverage. That is my new legacy.